Welcome back to The World This Week, or as I like to call it, They Talk, I Get Paid. They are Julia Wono, head of the Africa Desk at Internet Without Borders. Great to see you. On the other side of the studio, Christopher Dickey, foreign editor of the Daily Beast. Nice to see you, Christopher. Pierre Aski from Rue 89, journalist and co-founder of that groundbreaking French website. Lovely to see you, sir. And Régis Le Sommier from... Régis Le Sommier from Paris Match. That smile would maybe get Donald Trump to give the interview one day. We hope so. Let's continue with Trump, because I think this is a very rich scene. We've got other topics, but let's give a bit more time to Trump. Christopher, you were saying at the start of the first half that this house of cards, as I talked about it, won't come tumbling down. You think somebody's going to keep him there? Do you think he'll do the duration? You think he won't get impeached?
I think we won't have any idea until we get much closer to the midterm elections 2 years from now. I think right now the Republican leadership, for the most part, has decided to go with the flow, take advantage of what they can take. You were just reporting the Scott Pruitt approval. That's a perfect example. I mean, you shouldn't think that he should get the EPA administrator's job, but he's going to get it. The Senate approved it. They're going to approve virtually all of the cabinet picks of Donald Trump. They'll certainly approve Gorsuch, his Supreme Court pick. So all that's going to happen, and their agenda will move forward. And there are a couple of core constituencies here, and it's not only the sort of world wrestling entertainment constituency for Donald Trump. It's also the core conservative constituency of the Republican Party. And they have a chance now to do a lot of stuff that they wanted to do for a long time, essentially begin not only rolling back Obama's policies, but even starting to roll back New Deal policies, really pushing America back toward a conservative agenda, much smaller government, much less of a welfare state, even though it's not much of a welfare state to begin with. And they see this as an opportunity to do this that they're not going to have again. And if they dump Trump, it's not going to get better for them. It's going to create a kind of a chaos in their own ranks that will distract them and keep them from pushing that agenda. So until they feel they're going to lose their congressional seats 2 years from now, they'll stick with him.
So the billionaire businessman with the racy lifestyle of the past, perhaps of the present, we're not too sure, someone who represents a whole set of views that might be very different from those of the conservative right in USA. It's a real art of compromise, isn't it, what's going on?
Well, up to a point, but on the kinds of issues that get them votes and mobilize their base, like, for instance, anti-abortion, he came down on the right side of that, and he stayed on the right side of that. He wasn't always on the side that they wanted, but for the campaign and for now, he's anti-abortion, and they'll go with that. That's why evangelicals who should look at him, and Catholics who should look at him and say he's broken every commandment except for murder that you can think of, and
with journalists, that close.
Yeah, and it's that close with journalists, and and yet they vote for him.
Okay, I was going to say should women vote for Trump? I mean, I turned to you as a woman.
Should women vote for Trump? Obviously, no, but apparently
many
women
did.
thought he was the best person. Although many of them, I remember a report by New York Times which interviewed many Trump voters, and they explained that they didn't vote for Hillary because of the email, and they didn't trust her and preferred Bernie Sanders. But that's another debate. He's obviously not an achievement for women. We've seen the signing of that act which repels a bit abortion rights of women in the U.S. surrounded by this man, which was a quite depressing image. But I think also it's an opportunity for women and for women's rights to be at the forefront of issues again, because unfortunately these issues have been a bit forgotten about. The question of equality in between income inequality between men and women, despite huge differences, abortion, of course, but many other issues which have been a bit put aside in the political agenda in the U.S. Recently, and will come up again.
Régis.
I think one also an important element to follow up on the evangelical and the Catholic is the presence of Mike Pence. I think he's also working. I mean, he's a typical conservative from the Republican Party, from mainstream Republican conservative. So I think it's a reassuring element for them that somehow the vice president is going to maybe be able to tame those rocky elements, personality of Donald Trump. etc.
Remains to be seen. It's very interesting, isn't it? By way of moving our conversation on a little bit, I wonder what a meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un would ever be like. I mean, obviously, the North Korean story this week is one that probably belongs in a Bond movie. The alleged hit on his half-brother in Malaysia carried out by 2 female agents. Somehow, we don't quite know exactly what happened, but there's Kim Jong-un's half-brother who is lying in a morgue somewhere in Kuala Lumpur. Will the body go back? Will the body not go back? There's the poor gentleman in question. I wonder how Trump and North Korea might come together as a bit of a culture clash, obviously, but politically, how could it work? Pierre, any thoughts?
Well, it's an interesting challenge for Trump, and it might not move the way we think it might move. He said just before he came to the White House, there was a missile test by North Korea, and he tweeted, North Korea cannot be allowed to have ballistic missiles. It will not happen. Which would imply that we're going to bomb them or whatever. Now, last week, when he was meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister Abe in Florida, there was another test, and nothing. And I wonder what is going on behind the scenes. Whether at the same time he was talking with China again, not being so aggressive as before. Are we going to see a deal somehow?
Well, he said he's a deal person.
Yes, it could be a very.
Negotiates well.
He knows how to make deals.
And as we were saying earlier, General Mattis is not a fool. He's not going to let Trump press the button to bomb North Korea because you don't just do that by impulse, by waking up and
we hope.
And so. What is he going to do? And then I wonder if it's the first real case study that we have of not really an international crisis, but an international challenge.
One other things that you mentioned about him, interacting with Prime Minister Abe from Japan was the fact that happened in Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. So he's really trying to. He said he would make of Palm Beach the summer White House. So he's going to trying to create his own narrative with
it was the image of him sat there at the table like this, wasn't it? Sort of smiling as it was all going on,
Yes, and apparently also discussing some, classified information in front of everybody. Somebody actually showed a picture on Facebook of the guy holding the
nuclear
football. It's called,
the nuclear football. That's not very wise, but that's his style,
Yeah,
Florida.
Actually, I keep going back to an interview I did with Bob Gates, one of the grand old men, one of the wise men of Washington, CIA director, defense secretary under both Bush and Obama. And I was asking him about the madman theory of international relations. And this is more than a year ago. And he said something that I thought was very smart, and another guy, a CIA veteran, said the same thing to me, which was, Obama thought that we lived in a rational world, and that people would operate in their own best interests, and that you could deal with them in a rational way, and everybody could reach an understanding. But it may be that Putin and Kim Jong-un and some of these other people really don't see the world in the same rational terms that Obama did. And it may help for them to be more than a little bit afraid of an unpredictable president. I mean, this is what was called the madman theory under Richard Nixon.
That's right, yeah.
But Richard Nixon, the problem is Richard Nixon, whatever his problems, was not insane. The problem with Trump is that one often thinks he's right on the verge of complete madness. And I don't know how the world is going to deal with it. I just don't.
Yeah, but there's the problem of expertise and who has the upper hand on the final decision. When I was listening to, on another issue, the press conference between Netanyahu and Trump, you had the impression that, which I think is more than an impression, that Trump never devoted more than 5 minutes thinking about the Palestinian issue in his whole life. And that he didn't really know or care what he was talking about.
That certainly came across, didn't it?
And, one state, two states, who cares? But you know, when the day the Middle East explodes because of such a sentence, you understand who cares. You know, if you don't know the potential that Jerusalem or the Palestinian issue represents, it's very worrying. And the same goes to North Korea. I don't think Trump has the geopolitical map of Northeast Asia in mind, or the historical implications between Japan, Korea, China, and you know, and these are very complex issues that run very deep in history, a very careful balance of power, of influence. And so, is it Trump who's going to make the decision on what to do on North Korea? Is it Mattis? Is it the future NSC? We don't know. Is it Steve Bannon? I don't know. And that's the most worrying thing.
You mentioned
at the
that
moment.
name, Steve Bannon. That's one of the very scary things, because we were talking earlier about presidents surrounding themselves with people who can create that stability. I'm thinking Ronald Reagan. I remember when I was a young radical student thinking, this is
We were in
ridiculous.
kindergarten in those days.
Thank you. This is ridiculous. This actor's been elected, but you know, this is a man who'd run California. This man
Yeah,
had a
people think
record.
he's
This
one of
man
the
who
great presidents.
and went on to become one of the great presidents. Simple
Finished
as
the
that.
Cold War and
Well, yeah, exactly. But he surrounded himself with people who knew, and
Yes.
they covered for his
Yes, he had some of the
weaknesses.
most experienced
That's right.
Who's doing that for
diplomats
Trump?
and military.
yeah.
It doesn't seem to
But
be.
one other
Steve-
thing,
well,
you know,
Bannon.
yeah.
I mean, they went a bit backward on the Chinese and Taiwan issue because they said maybe. I mean,
And Bannon,
The word I
has
heard
lost
was conflict.
Flynn,
You know,
Yes,
wrong.
you know, so he's not, you know, on the Flynn was his guy. I
Was
mean,
he? I don't know.
where they were the two got you know, on the same page. So now it's going to be maybe a little more tricky for him.
I think that basically Trump's attention span is about the same as listening to country music songs. I don't know. I don't know if y'all listen to country music songs, but I do.
I was brought up listening to them.
And you know, for instance, at the inaugural thing before Toby Keith played there, and his most famous song is "Courtesy the Red, White, and Blue." And the active line in that is, in the aftermath of 9/11, is "We'll put a boot in your ass. It's the American way." And I think that's exactly the kind of language that Trump likes, and I think that that's the kind of language that speaks to his core, and that's the way he likes to
Go
speak.
ahead.
Other thing I'd like to add.
As long as it's not a boot.
There's something also that is completely different from the Obama area, but that is a little bit similar to the Bush areas. Is that I like you or I don't like you. Like I like the prime minister, the Japanese prime minister. I like Netanyahu is
Bibi.
my
Bibi, great
my
friends.
boy,
My
my
boy.
boy.
Yeah.
So it's this type of very macho style, more and during Bush time, I mean the pretty much like the disagreement between Chirac and Bush was very much, and the disagreement between France and the U.S. It shaped actually the foreign policy back then. So the personal relations are very important, and it looks like they're going to be very important
Well, he
for
liked
Donald
Abe
Trump.
so much
But
he wouldn't
on-
let go of his hand.
That's another thing.
but
Judy, go ahead.
on that
And on that,
issue
Trudeau was good.
of a world led by strong men, because that's what we're talking about.
It always seems
Kim
to be, doesn't it?
Jong-un, Putin, and
Erdogan.
Ali, everyone.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the last round, in my opinion. Why? Because I mean, most of them grew up in a world. A Cold War world, which is not the case of new generation leaders such as Justin Trudeau, for instance, who has had such huge success recently and who is perceived now as the new liberal leader in Northern America. So it's probably the last round, and they're probably playing all their cards because obviously in a world where the industrialization won't depend on oil or on commodity prices anymore, but rather on innovation and on.
So you're announcing Macron, French
right.
Trudeau.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, someone
But-
called him the French Tony Blair, didn't they? That's a kiss of death.
Yes,
to me.
yes,
I mean,
that's
really.
No.
Watch out,
no such
because
thing. It's not a question of age. It's
who Trump
an
put,
opinion.
and I think it's the first time we've ever seen that in the history of the United States, that Ivanka Trump sits. And Trudeau was there, and
And
Trump
she was staring at him.
She was sitting on the
Like any-
seat of the president. Maybe that means something, you know?
Yeah, maybe she will convince her father actually, to act more.
He's a handsome guy. That boot you were talking about, Christopher, earlier in the Conjuring Western song, the producer's putting it into my backside to move you on to talk about France. And we have two issues in France to talk
It's all
about.
part of the same picture.
One is François Fillon, and the other one is the issues in the suburbs, the banlieue. I won't do a long introduction. I'll take us straight into those two topics of conversation by launching you by saying, is François Fillon the only person who doesn't see himself now as a lame duck? Pierre?
Well, he definitely cannot accept the idea that he's lost. And maybe he's right. Because this election campaign has been so unpredictable, and every prediction that's been made has been proved wrong. And today, François Fillon is still hoping that he can survive the hostility wave that he is still in the midst of, and make it because his core voters are still there. He hasn't. He's dropped in the polls, but he hasn't collapsed completely. And he can think that he can make it because all the others are failing. Macron was the wonder kid a week ago, and now everybody's saying he's going down in the polls.
I've seen a poll putting him as a 68% against 30-something% winner against Marine Le Pen in the second round. But who believes the polls? That's the question.
And today they're even. Macron and Fillon, they're 18.5%. Marine Le Pen is way ahead with 26. So they've
narrowed.
They've narrowed, and so
I bow to you. I bow to you.
When people were saying Macron was ahead, it was all within the margin of error of the
that's
poll.
right.
I'm wondering.
No, go ahead.
Fillon has not lost.
So go ahead, Julie.
Right.
Go.
Now, I was wondering to what extent Fillon has not a bit sarcasized his campaign very recently.
Nice word.
Trying
Le
to
monde, yeah.
invent another one.
Does the rest of the world understand what it means?
Okay, to make
himself
to
more
put
like Nicolas
himself a
Sarkozy,
bit of
yeah?
more Sarkozy, because they had lunch 2 days ago together. It was reported, and he made a campaign speech, I think yesterday, and getting some of the campaign promises of candidate Sarkozy, for instance, the idea that punishment of youth delinquents.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Juvenile delinquents.
Sorry.
Juvenile.
Is this what he said? He said any teenager who strikes a policeman should accept that they're going to be punished.
Absolutely, he wants to lower the
16-year-old. You can go to jail at 16.
Because can I just say that when he said that, I thought, well, what about the policeman who hits the teenager? Shouldn't that policeman be punished as well? Because it works both ways.
Oh,
doesn't it?
don't be a
Obviously.
bleeding heart, for God's sake.
Obviously.
I was once as a teenager struck by a police officer, but I was from a working class background. We didn't complain. We weren't allowed to complain. That's how we felt, and that's how kids in the French suburbs feel, isn't it? That's why we get riots. That's why we get all these problems. Is that too simplistic, Christophe?
Well, I think getting back to Fillon for a second on that issue, I mean, to listen to Sarkozy, I think, is completely nuts. I mean, he is listening to Sarkozy, but Sarkozy is Mr. Security. Let's push security, and
that's what's working.
That's his only way out.
But Le Pen will beat him on that every day because
Yes,
Not
but
sure.
he has no, he
Second
cannot
round.
come. The main problem with Fillon is that he's built his entire campaign as being the white knight, the guy who's without any, who's going to fight
Scandal.
corruption, and there he has this on his hands. So the only way he's going to pull out of that is building on security and going international. However, I don't know if he's going to go to Lebanon or meet Putin. I don't know, but or whatever he's going to say. But these are the two main points where he can actually build up and get out of these.
Doesn't Russia
wrong paths.
risk being his downfall, though, if he increases
I don't think
the
so.
Russia?
Being pro-Russian is very in.
But the Russians at the moment are putting all their means against Macron. If you look at the Russian media, it's against Macron every day. They started these rumors about his private life, about him being a U.S. agent.
There was a nice, a very funny cartoon 2 days ago saying, you could see Russian hackers saying, "Yeah, we've launched hundreds of attacks on Macron's. We still haven't been able to find a platform."
Last word, quickly, last word.
Just one other thing. It means that it's a challenge even for politics in France. They have to adapt. We've seen what these leaks and hacking can do in U.S. election. So the EU and French presidential candidates specifically have to adapt to that and have a response, even online, to counter this.
Let me thank you for your contributions, but these people are waiting for the main event. Media Watch is next. And we welcome to the studio Emma James of Media Watch. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Great to see you. Over to it. Where you go.
Well,
Spread your wings.
Taking you back to Donald Trump, I'm afraid. I know you've found it difficult to move away from him all evening, such as his pervasive presence. And he really did take us all by surprise yesterday with that press conference, not only just with the fact that it was fairly impromptu, but obviously the content of what he said and the way in which he said it. We've all had a little bit of time to digest it now and get used to what he had to say. And Telnays in the Washington Post has come up with a wonderful cartoon. Clearly, she feels that he revealed his true colours in this press conference.
Okay.
And it is entitled Emperor Trump Has No Clothes. I'm hoping that we can see it in a moment. That would be quite helpful. There we go. Yes, Emperor Trump has no clothes, and there you can see his modesty is covered purely by a little sign saying fake news.
Fake news. There we go.
And really, Anne Telnays, her work is just fantastic
Amazing.
at the moment. Every day.
The cartoon tells the story, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Now, as far as Donald Trump himself goes, clearly he thought things went quite well, because this is what he had to tweet shortly after that press conference: "Make America Great Again," and a photograph with lots of thumbs up and very awkward-looking smiles, and just the one lone woman in that group. Reactions to that, well, as you might expect, there's been some mockery out there. The auditions to find the new Fonz were not going well. I remember him from Happy Days. And this person says she's fixed the problem, she's replaced everybody else's heads with money bags, and of course you've got a poop symbol for Donald Trump himself.
It's great what you can do, isn't it?
Absolutely. Donald Trump then went on to tweet about his press conference, saying thank you for all of the nice statements on the press conference. Fake media not happy. And you do have to wonder exactly how many people share those sentiments, but there are some out there. This is clearly a Trump supporter, creating him as a boxer, taking on CNN, looking very smug about it. Quite a strange visual, but there you go. Ari Fleischer, the former White House press secretary, had this to say: yesterday's news conference reminds me of Election Day. Reporters and people with college degrees think it was awful. I suspect many others loved it.
That was something that Christopher Dickey was
absolutely
hit on the head
now,
earlier
I'm
on.
not sure whether what Ari Fleischer is saying there is meant to be an endorsement of what Trump had to say, or whether it's really a warning to us all
take it either way,
to try to better understand those people who voted for
completely
Trump.
what Christopher was saying.
Absolutely. And it is something that it's a criticism that's been levelled against the press over and over again, that we simply don't get it. We don't understand what his
We talk
appeal
to each other,
is.
we ask each other's opinions, that goes round and round and round, and we miss out on what actual people are thinking. That's one of the accusations I've
Yes, it's
heard
kind of
many
a
times.
journalistic echo chamber. You talk about them in terms of Twitter. But if we look on Facebook too, the White House posted a little earlier the weekly address from President Donald Trump. It was pre-recorded. It's very short, not that much in terms of content that we didn't already know about. But what was interesting to see was the core support is still there, because the comments and the support was coming flooding in, and anyone who said anything detrimental to the president was met immediately with lots of insults and abuse.
So it was short, but it was great, and it was tremendous. Yeah.
It was the best. It was huge.
Obviously. However, although yesterday's press conference is going to provide a lot of material for the US comedians, it already has, and obviously
Forever and
Saturday
ever,
Night Live, I can only imagine what they're going to come up with this weekend. But what might actually reverberate a little more worryingly around the Oval Office is the fact that some members of the media deemed to be friendly to Donald Trump actually appear to be starting to turn on him. Shepard Smith at Fox News was particularly notable. Obviously, we know that Donald Trump watches Fox News. He talks about it all the time. One of the few organisations that he doesn't deride as fake news. Take a listen to what Shepard Smith had to say.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. He keeps repeating ridiculous throwaway lines that are not true at all, and sort of avoiding this issue of Russia as if we're some kind of fools for asking the question. Really? Your opposition was hacked, and the Russians were responsible for it, and your people were on the phone with Russia on the same day it was happening, and we're fools for asking the questions? No, sir. We are not fools for asking this question, and we demand to know the answer to this question. You owe this to the American people. We have a right to know.
So there you go, very strong words, not expected at all from Fox News.
Does anybody think he's going to keep his job?
I heard he's looking for a job at France 24.
Get him in here! We put him there, we'll do a double triple presentation.
No, I'm sorry, that was fake news.
Well, interestingly, Joe Scarborough, host of Morning Joe, who we know from Donald Trump's tweets that he does watch it. There does seem to be a bit of a tide turning there too. They've just announced that they're no longer going to allow Kellyanne Conway on the show because she blatantly lies. And Joe Scarborough...
Is that what they said?
Yes.
Good heavens.
Oh, absolutely. And Joe Scarborough, after this press conference, said everybody is scared to death by what they saw. By everybody, he means the people on Capitol Hill that he spoke to after that press conference. He says this isn't going to last long because he just doesn't have control of reality. Now, a lot of people have talked about is Donald Trump mentally ill? There's even been a petition.
It's been mentioned around this story.
Absolutely. And the number of people saying he's gone insane, he's having a meltdown, he's having some kind of a breakdown. One thing that is very interesting to take a look at on the website Psychology Today, written by Alan Francis, he says we have to stop calling Trump mentally ill. And he says this not to be a punchline, although it does sound funny, it is insulting to those who suffer with mental illness to do so.
It's so funny you can't laugh. Emma James with MediaWatch, thank you very much indeed. Thanks to our guests, Julia Wono, Christopher Dickey, Pia Askey and Régis Le Sommier. Thank you for your forbearance, your opinions, your good humour and your presence. Great to see you. And thank you for watching too, The World This Week. We continue a course of more news here on France 24. Stay with us.